just to start again, I introduced myself before. My name's Neil Gumley. I'm the director of the Orange Hive in Australia. We've just started up a small specific Prader-Willi business in the last 12 months. And also this presentation, as you can see, I'm not with Patrice Carroll. She is the director of the Latham Centre services, PWS services in Massachusetts in America, in a place called Oyster Bay, which it sounds very posh, and it really is. They look after close to 35 to 40 people on site with Prader-Willi syndrome, ranging from young teenagers, 12, 13-year-olds, all the way up to 40 to 50-year-olds. And they're a wonderful service centre. And in Berlin, which we had a conference just recently, which I'll talk a bit about later, we were asked to give a workshop, not so much of a presentation. This has been slightly changed to a presentation, but more of a workshop on friendships, partnerships, and sexuality in PWS, which came out of an idea that came out of Ireland, where caregivers wanted to move away, as John said, away from that idea of food. We wanted to move away from, okay, we've got a lot of those areas covered. So we wanted to look at how can we progress and not just focus on the food and move away from those areas. So we put together a question that we gave to the group that we were speaking to. So healthy relationships are a key factor in living a quality life. Disruptions in appropriate social skills, cognitive impairments, and challenges in day-to-day living can impact a person's ability to form and keep relationships. Is a person less deserving of a meaningful relationship simply because they need more support in creating, keeping them, or should we, as caregivers, work to create an environment where relationship skills can be learnt, improved upon, with practice and support? And it was a great question, because each day we had 40 to 50 people in the room, and they really looked at that question saying, okay, is this our role? Is our role to manage food and keep it locked up day to day, and that's our role? Or is our role to actually move from that now that we have some good supports and structure in there? So obviously you can't meet Patrice, she's not here, but myself. So I started in the PWS world about 10, 15 years ago, where I was given the task of setting up the first specific PWS home in Victoria for 5 gentlemen. And at the time, I'd done a degree in science and disability, and I knew a bit about Prader-Willi from my degree, but down in Melbourne back in those days, there wasn't much information about Prader-Willi. Well, there's still not much information about Prader-Willi, especially for caregivers. There's a lot of science out there, but there's not enough for how we actually look after and work with people with Prader-Willi. And at the time, I was working with the other director of the Orange Hive, who was my boss at the time. Now we're directors, which is great, so she can't boss me around anymore. And thankfully, she's not in this room, she's in the other room, so she'd give me an evil eye. But what we did was, we were told that we have 5. Come in. Oh, fantastic. Thank you. So at the time, we had 5 people with Prader-Willi syndrome who were in need of a home. And at the Department of Human Services at the time, there were other services and private services, but the Department of Human Services was a government organisation. So at the time, we had a group of gentlemen who were in need of to go into a group home. And as I said, back in those days, it was said, well, we have 4 or 5 people with Prader-Willi syndrome who need to live in a home. Well, they all have the same syndrome. Let's put them in a home together. Now, we look back now, if I could have that time again and look back now and go, would I have done things the same way? Definitely not. But we learned from it over the years, and we made some really good changes and decisions along the way, which improved the service and to an extent where we got a lot of things right over time. But at first, when we look back now, I go, wow, could I have done things differently? And unfortunately, at the time, there was nothing out there to say what we could do differently. There was overseas. So I wrote a letter away to the International Prader-Willi Association and said, there's a conference in Toronto, can I come? And they said, here's some money, come. And I said, fantastic. I got to meet some experts from Germany, from the UK and from the US who already had multiple homes. So for example, you're going to hear from someone today from Germany, his name's Norbert. Now, they manage up to 100 homes across Germany, hundreds of homes. How many do we have in Australia? 5, 6 specific homes? So we're talking about they have the understanding and ideas. So this is where I had the opportunity to learn from that. And from that and subsequent conferences, I was very lucky enough to be asked to become first a delegate for the Australian Caregivers Program. And then from there, after a very late night in Cuba and mojitos, a conversation was had at about 2 o'clock in the morning saying, would you like to join the International Caregivers Board, which at the time I accepted, and then 10 a.m. the next morning they said, do you remember that you accept? And I said, yes, I do, which was fantastic. And Damien here is also, he would understand, we were on that night and we joined the board that night, which was fantastic. So that's been my journey so far. And then from there, I just recently left my organisation I was working with and thought, hang on, where are the supports right now for people with Prader-Willi? Yes, there are supports for children, a lot of supports, which is fantastic, but where are the supports for the teenagers who are leaving school and taking that next step? Where are the supports for the teenagers or the adults who have just come out of school and go, I need a new home? Where are the supports for the parents who turn around and say, how do I get my child into a home? And that's what we're looking, that's where I've come, where we've got to a point where we're looking to try and meet those needs. So that's who I am. So what we tried to do in Germany, which we're going to present today, is we're trying to develop a greater understanding and best practices when we talk about friendships and relationships, and how do we challenge those ideas that we're not just looking at the food and we're trying to step up and trying to become a greater community. Let's challenge and change the way that we think about Prader-Willi syndrome. As I said just before, 10 years ago when we started, it was all about food. It was, once you've got the food solved, you're okay. And now what we know is, well, no, that became 10%. Once we got the food solved, that's only 10% of our problems that we're going through. There are other issues that are at play at the time. As I said, well, there's not much information out there that we can draw upon and that we can go to a computer and say, well, how do I look after an adult who's looking to make friends? So there's not that literature out there that we can read upon. So when we looked at the topics, we wanted to break them down more individually. Friendships, which is a bit different to what we call partnerships and relationships. So we all have different relationships. And then the big one, which is a bit of a fun topic, is the sex and sexuality. And I'm not too sure. One of the first things I was told when we did a bit of training, which is back in 2014, was that no one's interested in sex and sexuality. I can tell you, it didn't take long for me to go, oh, no, that's not true. Straight away, no, that's not true. So just to, as we know, it is an interesting topic. There is no right or wrong answers in this topic. So I'll tell you a story. In Cuba, we had, on the second day of the conference, we had the scientific stream and the caregiver stream all in the one room. And we had a bit of a round table, and one of the parents put their hand up and said, my daughter wants to enter into a relationship with a gentleman. And you could have dropped, you could have cut the air with a knife, the tension. It was divided right down the room. There were those who said, you cannot allow your daughter to be in a relationship. But then the other half was saying, well, why not? Why can't they be in the relationship? So I was really interested to see that in life, and especially in that community, there was a big divide about what should happen and what shouldn't happen. Over the time, these are the observations that we've seen, or I'll bring up today. There are observations of what I've been able to see over the last 10, 15 years that I'll be speaking about today. Again, like I said before, if you want to speak, put your hand up and have a chat. There are no right or wrong answers, and because this is a sensitive topic and some people have maybe more conservative views or different views, that's okay, we'll respect everyone's views. and have a discussion. Let's have a chat about this, because this is what we're here to do. So, first of all, what I'm going to try and do today with friendships and talking about friendships is try to define the idea of what friendships are. What are some of the stumbling blocks around friendships, the risks and the benefits, the need for early socialisation, how can we as caregivers facilitate these friendships, how do we go about maintaining healthy relationships, it's a really important one, healthy relationships, and obviously at the end of the day, what can go wrong. Oh, I'm going, oh sorry. There we go. Makes it look better. Do I need to go back, or we've got a pointer here? So, as I said, we're going to be talking about all these things that we're going to have on today. Okay. So, first of all, let's define what friendship means to you. So, I'm going to point out a few people here. And please, this, as I said, so, Damien, what do you think of friendship?
Friendship, I guess it's like past being an acquaintance, somebody that you've got to know to a certain level, but I guess there's quite a span of when you call somebody a friend, and then, but like a shared understanding and a bit of like you can rely on that person for certain things and shared interests, things in common.
Yeah. Kim?
When you have people that you can rely on to talk to about things, spend time with, but not just fun stuff when you're going through a bit of a tough time.
Does anyone else have any ideas of what friendship is? Don't be afraid. You can put your hand up or something.
Mutual respect.
Yep. Anyone else? No? We've had 3 different definitions of friendship in this room already, and I bet you there's probably 4, 5, 6 different types of friendships. And that's the point. How we define what a friendship is, or how we look at friendship, I might have lots of friends. I play cricket, my wife will say, you've got all your cricket friends. I said, well, I only see them for 7 hours on a Saturday afternoon. And then my friends, I won't see them during the week, but they are my friends. My wife goes, they're your best friends, and you're not at home, you play cricket. We all have different ideas of what friendship is.
Does she sound like that when she says?
Sometimes, depends on when I get home late. But that's what we're trying to understand. We're trying to get an understanding out here is that we all have different ideas of what friendship is. Now, you've all had experiences. How do we think the person with Prada Willie might think and define what a friendship is? Does anyone have a go at that? Yeah, go for it.
Well, I've got a daughter with Prada Willie, she's 18, and she says she has lots of friends, but I would, basically, if it was me, I would say they're more like acquaintances. They're people she knows their names, she knows a little bit about them, but she's not interested in hanging around with them really, or really talking to them, but she calls them friends. But that's her definition of friendship is different to any of the definitions that I've heard here this morning.
Yep.
And that might also be, that's fine, but it's different.
Absolutely. You were
Yeah, my son is 20, and he would simply call someone he's been chatting with in Roblox his friend. So he's made connections with people, but you know, he hasn't gotten to know them personally. His teachers could be his friends, his caregivers are his friends. Yeah, his definition is not what I would say. He's also engaged, and so in that sense, I wouldn't call it an engaged couple. They don't see each other very much. So there's that connection as well, which is totally different to what I would say.
Yep. I've worked in a house, managed a house with Prada Willie, worked with people with Prada Willie for the last 10 years. Sometimes they call me their friend. Maybe it's because I cook. Like John said, the story of someone bringing in the half-eaten chocolate bar, and they generally gravitate towards that. What I'm trying to get here is that it's very complex. There's no right or wrong answer here. And what we're trying to do is, how do we separate that understanding of what they define as a friend? How can we potentially, do we accept that, or do we try to input our imprint on what friendship is, and how do we improve on that, and how do we facilitate friendships in social groups. So some of the stumbling blocks that you'll see along the way that we face many times. So obviously in social skill challenges, individuals with PWS may have difficulty understanding social cues, which can affect their ability to navigate and maintain relationships. Have we seen that sort of blank look, that sort of, I can't understand why you might be upset, those sort of understandings? Obsessive behaviour, they might engage in repetitive or obsessive behaviour that can be off-putting or difficult for peers to understand. Has anyone seen that obsessive behaviour? So once we're on a roll with something, we can have repetitive questions, that same question maybe over and over, but also that can be off-putting if they've got a new friend and they sometimes want to gravitate a lot of that time to that friend, so that obsessive behaviour. Emotional regulation, which is managing emotions, reactions can be challenging, which may lead to conflict, misunderstanding in social interactions. So we do know that at a drop of a hat, if there's sometimes some problems that are going on at times, that their ability to regulate their emotions, even in a setting like this or around people, can be difficult. And that can be sometimes slightly off-putting for their friends or the people that they are friends with. Hypertonia and motor issues. Physical difficulties can sometimes impact social interactions, especially in childhood or adolescence. I was working with a gentleman who really wanted to be involved in a bike group, and unfortunately, because of obesity and weight challenges, he struggled to be involved in the bike group. But we worked on a challenge of getting the weight down and making sure that we can get there. But he had a goal, which is really important. So there are those physical difficulties that we sometimes come up against, and communication difficulties. There may be challenges in verbal or non-verbal communications that can hinder effective interactions with others. So some of the benefits, though, that we see with creating friendships. Friendships can help individuals with PWS develop essential social skills, improve communication, and enhance their ability to interact appropriately in various settings. Emotional supports, it's a really important one. Friends provide emotional support, which can particularly be valuable for individuals with PWS who may experience social isolation or emotional difficulties due to their condition. What I found, a lot of parents have come to myself in the past 6 months and have said, our son is doing great, but what he is struggling is finding his tribe, his people, his social connections, his friends. So he'll go to his day program Monday to Friday, but Saturday and Sunday he's just at home. So where are we looking to try and help facilitate those areas and get them involved with groups? Enhanced quality of life, meaningful social interactions can contribute to a better quality of life. Well, that's an obvious one. But again, once what we're looking at is starting earlier and starting to try and get them involved. We can always get them involved, and sometimes we're going to make mistakes, and I'll say this a few times. It's okay to make mistakes. So let's get them involved in social interactions at an earlier age. Increased independence. Positive friendships can encourage individuals with Prader-Willi syndrome to be more independent and engage in activities outside of their immediate family or care setting. It's a really good one. The one thing that I've heard from adults with Prader-Willi is they love their independence. They see others going about their daily life and they go, why can't I just be like me or other people? Why can't I do the same thing? And well, we should be trying to facilitate how can we do that in a safe environment. And cognitive behavioural growth. Social interactions can stimulate cognitive and behavioural growth, offering new perspectives and learning experiences. So again, that repetition continue. If we keep putting ourselves out in social interactions, we're going to stimulate cognitive behaviour growth and offer new perspectives, which is, see. Now, some of the risks with challenges, individuals with Prader-Willi syndrome develop friendships can help individuals develop and improve their... Have I just done that one? Oh, sorry. There we go. So these are some of the risks that we see with behavioural challenges. Individuals with PWS may exhibit challenging behaviours. These behaviours can sometimes strain friendships or lead to misunderstandings. Social isolation, this is a really important one because I think we see this a lot in our community. There's a lot of social isolation. If social interactions are not well managed, individuals with PWS might experience rejection or exclusion, leading to further social isolation or low self-esteem. Overdependence. There is a risk of developing over-dependent relationships that can lead to obsessive behaviour, as we talked about before, that obsessive behaviour we sometimes see. Misunderstandings with communications. Friends who are not familiar with Prader-Willi syndrome may misunderstand their condition, leading to frustration or conflicts. Education, communications are crucial to mitigate this risk. And health concerns. Friends may not always understand the health-related issues associated with PWS, such as the risk of obesity or other medical conditions, concerns which can affect the dynamics of the friendship. So, like the chocolate bar before, they sometimes tend to seek out friends who don't understand the condition and say, oh yeah, come out, we'll go out for dinner. So we get these sometimes, and that's why in our community as well, we see a lot of community providers or providers out there offering social groups, but what do they always revolve around? Food. They're always revolved around food. So we'll go out for a day and then we'll go for lunch. And yes, while at the same time we want to be promoting those social interactions, how can we find that happy medium where we're actually focusing on the social interactions and then we try and bring in the food down the track? Now we're not going. There we go. So, early socialisation. This is a really important one. I had a great chat with a lot of parents last night. And so I said, well, why don't we talk about early socialisation? I've got kids, got 3 kids. And in our lives, they're involved in cricket clubs, they're involved in football clubs, they're involved in their community, they're involved in their school. They're out, lots of friends, they're going to sleepovers, they're going to birthday parties. What we see right now and what we're trying to do and help is why can't we do that for someone with Prader-Willi in the early stages? Whether they be 5 to 10-year-olds, 10 to 15, 15 to 20, why can't we be doing that? Why can't we be trying to get them out into interactions in a safe environment? So like we said, like John said before, with structure behind it, and we put some planning in, then there's no reason why we can't try and get them into those situations. Yes, there will be drawbacks and there will be problems along the way, but what do we do with problems? We learn from them and we can make changes to improve them the next time we go around. Especially, I know now, we had about 10 people in the room before, now we're bursting at the seams, we're fantastic. We've got some parents in the room, and I can see I've got some younger parents. No? All older? Pardon?
PWS.
So what I tend to see, and what I've seen over the time is that, and rightly so, parents will want to protect their children. I want to protect my children. I don't want to send them out into a world where they could hurt themselves. So it's really difficult to let go of that sometimes of those chains, because when we let go of those chains, we think that problems are going to happen. But by letting go of some of those chains, not all of those chains, we might be able in a way to set them up for those later years in life. Especially in the housing sector, what we tend to see is parents, and parents are fantastic, but they get to 50, 60, 70 and say, I can't do this anymore. Here, have my son or daughter. Put them home. Are they set up to live in a home? Are they set up to work and live with other people? Unfortunately, they might not have had those skills developed at an earlier age. So when we say early socialisation, we're saying start early. Playgroups are great for younger children. Playgroups are fantastic. They really are. And they don't always have to be around food. Playgroups can be really important around the actual activity. I got a message from my wife just the other day. She sent me a video of my son playing around, and he was involved in a running group. But they were playing interactive games beforehand. It wasn't just turn up and run 3 kilometres. It was the interactive games around running around. It wasn't focused on the running, it was focused on the games, and that got them moving just as well. So there's lots of little ideas that we can get into moving around. Schools, mainstream schools, I heard some stories that their children are going through mainstream schools, which are fantastic. They're great for facilitating those stories, but there's also other schools out there, and clubs, sporting clubs. I know gentlemen who are involved in rugby clubs, they're involved in cricket clubs. It's such a great way of getting out there and being involved with people, not just with Prader-Willi, but other people who don't have Prader-Willi, just in general life, and it gives them those great experiences. So our role as caregivers or parents is to try and facilitate these and to think outside the square. How can we start getting these ideas happening and moving around as caregivers? And that's our primary role, is to try and get out there and think outside the box and work on how we get that, how we get those little different ideas out there. When and why do we intervene? Well, we know that, like I said, sometimes we've got the obsessive behaviour, so we have to keep a track of how we do it and why we do it, but we also need to make sure that we keep it in a safe environment. I worked with, I think, Norbert, who you'll hear from later from Germany. He says we like to work inside the box. We control the box. So sometimes we can narrow that box and make it nice and small, or we can open the box up and let more information in. But we control the box. So they have control over what's inside the box, but we control the size of that box, and we can move that box from side to side. And also, a definition of a good friend is not universal. So I was working with a young gentleman at the time who told me about his new exciting friend who he met online. Turns out he was a bikie, and we had to find out. And then that obsessive behaviour came to a point where he told me, "Oh, I said something about the bikie's wife, and now the bikie's trying to find my address and try and kill me." So its snowball effect happens. So again, it's trying to work through, and unfortunately social media is a bit of a killer right now, because we all have opinions, and when we get on social media we can read lots of things, and all of a sudden we become friends with people and we don't understand. So it's really important that we're always educating about friendships and ideas and things along those lines. Maintaining healthy, well, we do know people with Prader-Willi sometimes have an egocentric nature. Does anyone, have we seen that, the egocentric? Me. The example I like to use is when we're living in a house, we have a bus that's used to go out every day. And on certain days, Mondays and Wednesdays, it's Johnny's idea to use the bus. It's his day to use the bus. And the other participants know that. But we always used to say, if someone really needs to use the bus in the day and they're not feeling well, they have to go to hospital thing, then they go, yep, no problem. If you're sick, if someone's sick and they need to use the bus, I'm quite happy to put my hand up and say they can use the bus. Until that day, when their leg's hanging halfway to the side and they've got a broken leg and we have to get them to the hospital or we have to move them to the thing, no, it's my day to use the bus. So, egocentric nature. The theory of the mind, understanding what someone else is feeling. I love this one. The ability for someone to actually understand what someone else is feeling. It's a really difficult one for people with PWS to actually understand, to look at their face and say, I know that you're hurt, or I know you're not feeling well, or I know you're happy, or they're surprised. So they probably sometimes try to mimic what they're trying to say, those emotions. It's really important to have education and awareness to maintain those healthy relationships. Again, structured social activities is a really important one. Really have those structured social activities. Work with organisations that sort of look to have those structured activities, get them out involved, and especially those who understand Prader-Willi. A lot of information I've spoken to people over time is they do a lot of training and support, but they say it's not Prader-Willi training. It's training about behaviour, but it's not quite Prader-Willi training. So when the support workers are going out, yes, like I said before, they're going out and maybe going bowling or mini golf or karaoke, but it's all food-based. There's always something food around it. So then the activity becomes, I'm going out for food. I had a conversation with a family member the other day, and they said the activity was cancelled, and they were able to take them to the same activity, but but there was no food there, so they were so upset. So we want to try and take away from that food-based activity. Support systems is really, really important, so make sure you have the really intensive support systems around. Everyone understands the direction in which they're moving. Clear communication. One of the first advices I was ever told years ago was, really on, if we're going to the beach, I used to say, hey, this Sunday we're going to the beach. Oh, fantastic. It gets to Sunday, it's -5, it's snow, it's hailing, right? And that's Melbourne, so right now, look at the weather outside. But you still need to go to the beach that day. But you look outside, it's terrible. We actually might get hurt if we go there. No, you said we were going to the beach. So clear communication, understanding. So that little change of words, we're going to the beach on Sunday if the weather is okay and it's not bad. Or just add those little things. So clear communication is essential. And the other one is gradual integration. Really, gradual integration is really important. Baby steps. Let's take little steps into developing these friendships. And what can go wrong? Well, we know, as I said before, lots can go. We're going to make mistakes. You're going to go out and they're going to have friends. You're going to try different things, and there's going to be mistakes and there's going to be fallbacks. But just like in life, we're all allowed to make mistakes. We make choices and we make mistakes. Our job is to be underneath to support them to make those mistakes in a safe way. Oh, I'm going to go back. So when we talk about friendships and partnerships and relationships, we like to change that sort of a friend. We talked about the definition of a friendship, or we talk about partnerships and relationships. So when we have relationships and partnerships, we're talking about family members. We're talking about the professional community and paid caregivers. How do we maintain healthy relationships in terms of who we're working with and what can go wrong? So how do we define a relationship? And when we talked about friendships, relationships / partnerships and sexuality, we talked about the relationships that a person with PWS might have with a caregiver, or might have with a psychologist or a psychiatrist, or might have with other family members. And again, in this world, there are lots of different types of relationships. So some of the relationships we see, we've got the parent relationships. The sibling relationships is also one that's often forgotten about. Extended family. So that extended family, I had another story. I keep going back to stories, but this one family member goes, our grandmother doesn't understand it. We go over to her house, she just wants to cook food. She's Greek, we want to cook food. She's losing weight. That's a good thing sometimes. So there's extended family members that we have those relationships with. We've got the professional and community relationships. We've got the paid caregivers who it's so important for paid caregivers to have access to the correct training. I said that before. There's behaviour training and there's Prader-Willi behaviour training, which is so very important. And as I said, a group in a house that I was working with, they kept on saying, yeah, we're getting all this training on behaviour, but it's not Prader-Willi training. And like John mentioned before, stories are so important. When we're talking about stories and passing on stories, we're learning and we can put ourselves in those positions. Professionals and professional boundaries, it's really important to develop a community of practice around that relationship. When a caregiver becomes a friend, or where do we find that line between being a caregiver and, yeah, we can be mates, and hey, am I the one who's going to take you down to McDonald's to keep you happy? And all of a sudden they have good friends. Sometimes caregivers might not understand that. They think that they're doing the right thing and try and, hey, we've had no outbursts or any problems this week. Why is that? Health professionals from an early age, it's a really important relationship, because a strong relationship with your doctor, your GP or psychologist is really important, and maintaining those health professional relationships are really important. Caregivers understanding, and I said before, it's so important to have a community of practice, everyone working on the same page, where a caregiver can pick up the phone and have a chat to the psychologist, has access to the caregiver group. right? Or we can pick up the phones and a participant or someone with Prader-Willi might go to the doctor. I love this story. I had someone years ago who went to the doctor and said, "Oh, I've got a headache." On a scale of 1 to 10, what's the headache worth? He goes, "It's an 11. Next minute we're doing MRIs and all that, but there was nothing, he just wanted to have the day off school. So, and we did all the MRIs and go through that. So having that understanding, that relationship between professionals and that community, so we're all on the same page. And community relationships is another really important one. Having actually community, so people in the area, like that story before, the McDonald's around the corner, or the coffee shop around the corner knows who this person is, or around, they actually understand, know who these, and we're all in constant dialogue. We're not trying to go behind the back and so on, but they actually understand they can work with that person and say, "Hey, well, do you need to have those extra packet of chips today?" Or something, make those different choices. So maintaining relationships all comes around having an understanding of healthy relationships. What's the difference between a positive and negative relationship? These are all really important in maintaining the really strong relationships. And because I'm looking at the time here, we don't have a time. I'm going to move on to the last part, is sex and sexuality. So again, this is a really, really interesting topic that we found over in Berlin. People were only just starting to tiptoe into this area on how it works. So I'll just quickly go through. We'll try and define sexual relationships for someone with PWS, what it looks like. The mechanics and anatomy is for consideration. Ideas of sexuality and informed consent. Do we shelter or explore? And the dignity of risk. So, I love this story that Patrice told me. She goes, so she was working with a participant and she goes, "I've got a boyfriend and I go home and I Netflix and chill." And she goes, "What does Netflix and chill mean?" She was a bit worried. She goes, "Well, you put on Netflix and you watch Netflix for 3 hours on the couch and then I go home and he goes home." So what is that understanding of what a boyfriend and girlfriend is for someone with Prader-Willi syndrome? How do we define that and understand that and what it looks like? We know that. That's all right. Absolutely. So, over the years, I've spoken to lots of people with Prader-Willi, and they've always said they want a family, they want the marriage, the kids. I'm going to go get a little bit of house down by the beach and have the dog and the family and car. What does it look like for them? How do they? And it means I might just want kids. How do I get kids? I don't know how I'm going to get kids, but I know I want little kids running around. What does marriage look like for the person with Prader-Willi? How do we try and help those ideas and understandings? And also, it's now really more than ever access to the appropriate training for both carers and participants. So we know that we're stepping into these areas and understanding it because, as I said, 10 years ago, all we did was focus on food. We focused on getting the food right. Now that we're getting ways around focusing on food and not just, like we discovered yesterday, there is no magic pill right now. So what can we do? So once we get those structures right and food doesn't become a problem, we've got these other things that we can start stepping into and looking after and helping them with in that world. So just some of the facts around the hormone imbalance and the mechanics of just to take into consideration. So we know that sex hormones, PWS often leads to an imbalance in sex hormones such as estrogen and testosterone. This can result in delayed or incomplete sexual development. And puberty, individuals with PWS might experience a delayed or onset in puberty. And the other one is hypogonadism. Reduction in the gonadal function. Many people with PWS have reduced functions of their gonads, testes in males and ovaries in females. This is often due to the lower levels of specific hormones that can lead to a reduction of the sex hormone. So again, that goes back to that training I did years ago that said these ideas might not happen, but still, they create ideas, they watch TV, they watch shows, they create ideas in their head. It doesn't mean they can't feel that. So we do know that there are some physiological problems. It doesn't mean there's some issues up here that they go, hang on, I've seen that. I've seen the TV shows, the house, the car, the kids. I watch shows on TV, I'm on Facebook, I see all these things. So it's still out there. With males with PWS might experience a reduction in libido and erectile dysfunction due to hormonal imbalances. The reduced production of testosterone can impact sexual desire or function. Females with PWS might have irregular or absent menstrual cycles and reduced fertility. They might also experience delayed or incomplete breast development. And the last one, social understandings. Due to cognitive and social challenges, individuals with PWS might have limited understanding of sexual development and relationships. This can impact their approach to sexual health and education. So that cognitive understanding of sex and relationships and marriage and all those, it's a factor in how we look and how we work with people with Prader-Willi. I had another story once of someone who was in a mainstream school and they were doing sex ed classes. And they were looking about what things that you can look at and what you can do and all these ideas of masturbation and how it works. And all of a sudden, we go home and we try these things out. And we do it in open public spaces because we don't actually understand that it should be in a private room. So these are the things that we have to contend with and try and give more understanding and education around. Understanding consent. So it's a really important question too about, do they actually understand? Yes, no, and they understand. In each of the states, there should be some great sexual health services that are part of the government. I know in Victoria that we have a great service that we've used in the past, that we can talk about, that we can actually bring people out and have educational discussions about consent. And it's a really important one because sometimes people go, well, actually, no, I do it because it feels good. Or do you understand what no means? Do you understand you can say no? It's really important to have those discussions and be that so they're as informed as possible. So it's important to make sure they're as informed as possible. And lastly, again, what could go wrong? Well, everything's good in theory. Like we said before, the importance of what we're talking about is we're trying to educate and get people out there and understanding. And it's our role as caregivers is to try and give experiences as much as possible so we can help them take those steps. It's okay to make mistakes and it's okay to have fallbacks, but our job is to pick them up when they do fall and to have that create that soft cushion underneath them that they can fall and make mistakes. So in conclusion, we as caregivers play a vital role in facilitating and help maintaining friendships and relationships. We need to start evolving our thinking because we have moved on from the idea that everything around PWS is just food. So we need to evolve our thinking to start going, well, we've got the food maybe sorted in some way because we have that great structure. How can we start to maintain these healthy relationships? Becoming more open-minded. So let's start thinking outside the box. It's okay to have relationships. It's okay to be in relationships. And it's okay to make mistakes, as I said lastly before. It really is okay to make mistakes because we can't learn if we don't make mistakes. And that's a really important part. And that's it. Thank you.